I said, the meaning of the word I cannot be anything other than consciousness. I recognize myself as a conscious being. When we use the word conscious as an adjective to being, being becomes I, conscious becomes an adjective, an attribute. That implies there is such a thing as I, enjoying the attribute of being conscious. That means there can be a being without being conscious. When you say a blue lily, there can be a lily without being blue. When I say conscious being, there can be a being without being conscious. If there is a being without being conscious, I would never know that being unless I am conscious of that being. When I become conscious of that being, then I become again a conscious being. To be conscious of that being, forget it. This ends up in a regression. There is no end for it. But I am conscious of you. You are conscious of me. And therefore you have to settle that being cannot but be consciousness. The content of being is consciousness. The content of I, which is that being, is but consciousness, cannot but be consciousness. Everything else is object of consciousness, including all that occurs in my mind, all that I know, objects are of consciousness, objects of consciousness. Everything else is object of consciousness, including my hunger and thirst, every emotion, my memory, all that I know is object of consciousness. Consciousness alone is I. It opens up a lot of a lot of not questions, a lot of facts becoming evident. No more questions. Honestly, no more questions. It only unfolds more facts. When you have a breakthrough of a very important fact, that breakthrough really opens up a lot of things for you to recognize. Discovering the self as consciousness opens up the self for us to discover more and more about the self. I said everything else is unlike the self. This everything else also becomes an object to be understood further. Whether there is anything else other than consciousness, this consciousness opens up. As I said, a certain fact that it is far-reaching. Space is object of consciousness, obvious. Space is not conscious of consciousness. It is an object of consciousness, as time is. When anything is an object, the object doesn't condition consciousness in any manner. The object is dismissible always. Any object of consciousness can become outside your mind, therefore outside consciousness. What is outside your mind is outside consciousness. Like you see the Swami now. The Swami is inside your consciousness as though, and when you think of something else, Swami is outside consciousness. Honestly speaking, the Swami is inside your mind in the sense is the object of your thought. Swami is no more the object of your thought. Something else is object of your thought. You think of something else, and that something else becomes the object of thought. And the Swami is outside. Correct? And therefore, what is outside your thought? What is the object of your thought? That is what we say, outside consciousness, inside consciousness. As though there is something outside consciousness, inside consciousness. What is really happening is what is outside thought, inside thought. Means what is captured by a thought becomes the object of consciousness for you. Therefore, mind Each mind has its own thought at a given time. That is the object it is going to recognize. In my mind, this is the thought. In another mind, it may be something else. That is why when one teaches something to somebody, that somebody has to be with the teacher. Therefore, what is being taught is understood by the other. If the other is thinking of something else, then no, there is no communication. Therefore, you are always referring an object to be outside your consciousness only to what is outside your thought. But the Swami is inside your thought. Swami is outside your thought. But I would like you to understand, can there be anything outside consciousness? It's an important thing. Like even people are inside your room. There are people outside your room. Are there people outside space? It's exactly the same. Because space itself is a concept of consciousness, within consciousness. There is no such thing as consciousness as an object in space, but space is an object of consciousness. And the space, distance, time can be away from consciousness. As it happens when you sleep, as it even happens between two thoughts. There is no space, there is no time. Suppose there is no recognition of anything, any object in time and space. There is no space, time or anything. But between two thoughts, it is the same. In sleep, there is no space, there is no time. Consciousness doesn't become eclipsed. In dream, there is presence of consciousness. In sleep, there is absence of everything else. There is presence of consciousness. Then again, in the morning you say, I didn't experience anything because there is presence of consciousness. There is no such, we don't need that sleep also to cite here. Between two thoughts, a thought comes and another thought. Between these two thoughts, what obtains is no particular object, suppose, no time, no space also. Consciousness is. Consciousness is not bound by space. between consciousness and any object of consciousness. The distance is space, after all. Between consciousness and object of consciousness, what is the distance? Space. Okay? Space. Really? Between consciousness and object of consciousness is space. This space, is it object of consciousness or not? And between that space, what you are talking about, distance, and consciousness, what is the distance? Swamiji, what a question is this? That is what I want you to ask. There is no question. Between space and the distance, there is no distance. Between space and an object, there is distance. That space is not away from consciousness. In fact, there is no distance between consciousness and an object. An object is within consciousness, and between two objects there can be a distance. Two objects of consciousness, like your own body is your object of consciousness, is an object of consciousness, and my body is an object of consciousness. Between these two bodies there is distance. Between the TV set and the Swami, between your body, okay, your body and the TV set, the TV screen, there's a distance, and this distance is object of consciousness. And between consciousness and the TV screen, there is no distance whatsoever. And the distance itself is object of consciousness. Between consciousness and the object, any object of consciousness, what I say, there is zero distance. Now, let us leave the TV screen and imagine now some stars in the sky. And what is imagined star and consciousness, there is no distance. The imagined star is within consciousness. Suppose you happen to see the stars, and between the stars and consciousness, there is zero distance. In fact, between consciousness and any object, there is no distance. Like even if I ask a question, between space and an object in space, what is the distance? Between the hand and space, what is the distance? Zero distance. Let me move the hand anywhere. Distance is zero. Correct? Because space is all pervasive. Abhi malum hai? Space is all pervasive. And therefore, space being all pervasive, let my hand be anywhere. Between space and the hand, distance is zero. Now just look at yourself. You are seeing my hand. So between your being is consciousness. Between consciousness and the object of consciousness, here hand, what is the distance? The distance is zero. Between space and hand, distance is zero. Between consciousness and the hand in space, there is zero distance. Therefore, consciousness is, I would say now, not spatially limited. It is not located in space. Understand? Is not located in space. In consciousness is located space, is located anything. Anything that you see implies space and time, and the object implying time and space exists in consciousness, can come and go. Consciousness is not spatially limited. What is not spatially limited, we say, is all pervasive. Understand now? All pervasive. This word all pervasive doesn't make any difference in your life. Swamiji, I know that I am consciousness. Okay. And it is all pervasive. So what? So what? That so what is because you don't understand the implications. One doesn't understand the implications of this all pervasiveness. This all pervasiveness is what you experience whenever you are happy. Happiness is our matlab. Anything you want, atmanastu kamaya, means anything you want is for your being happy. Whatever you want is meant for your happiness. Even if you want the other to be happy, then seeing the other happy, you are happy. That means you are more mature. Seeing the other happy, you are happy. Seeing the country happy, you become happy. And that means you are more mature. Your ego is more inclusive. It is not restricted to a small family. You have expanded your ego to identify with the country, and therefore the country's happiness becomes your happiness. In fact, in happiness, do you know what you experience? The all-pervasiveness of the self, the wholeness of the self. This all-pervasiveness is exactly the content of your matlab. Matlab means what? What I want. This is what I want. Anything that you want has to make you happy. Well, that is exactly what this all-pervasiveness means. More of this we will see when we come back next. Thank you.
भारत देश हिताय भरता